Stepping into the battle against the spread of slavery, Lincoln wielded the Declaration itself against his opponents. "There is no reason in the world," Lincoln said in one of his famous debates with Douglas, "why the Negro is not entitled to all the rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I hold that he is as much entitled as the white man, and the right to eat the bread without leave of anybody else, which he earns. He is my equal. He is the equal of Judge Douglas," he said, "and he is the equal of every other man." Now, he's criticized pretty frequently today by his own apologists, by people who still very much have an appreciation for Lincoln, for distinguishing between human rights, or natural rights, and civil rights. Because in the same quotation, he says that he agrees with Douglas, essentially, that, you know, the black man should not be my political equal. Yet he is unwilling to give on his right to natural rights, to what Jefferson outlined in the Declaration of Independence. "They meant to set up a standard maxim for free society," Lincoln said about the authors of the Declaration at another of the debates, "which should be familiar to all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence, and augmenting the happiness and value of life to all people, of all colors, everywhere. Liberty, equality, and happiness, then, not slavery, are what the founders intended to spread," in Lincoln's mind. Lincoln went back to the founding principles to show the base alloy of hypocrisy, as he called it, in a nation founded for liberty and engaged in slavery. "Judge Douglas is going back to the era of our Revolution," Lincoln said, borrowing words from his political hero, "and muzzling the cannon which thunders its annual joyous return. When he invites any people willing to have slavery to establish it, he is blowing out the moral lights around us. When he says he cares not whether slavery is voted up or voted down, he is penetrating the human soul and eradicating the light of reason and the love of liberty in this American people." Very dramatic words. Very passionate person. Lincoln lost the election, but in the eyes of many of his contemporaries and nearly all historians, he won the debate, and the press coverage of the campaign raised Lincoln's profile nationally, making possible his election as president 2 years later. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the first unquestionably constitutional step toward the 13th Amendment, which would permanently abolish slavery in the United States in 1865. Using his power as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, Lincoln took the one decisive action that Chief Justice Roger Taney's Supreme Court could not touch. As a war measure, he declared slaves in the rebellious states thenceforward and forever free. Months after issuing the proclamation, Lincoln delivered his address at Gettysburg. 77 years ago, Lincoln said, once again evoking Jefferson's Declaration, "Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." In the wake of immense and violent national divisions, especially over the questions of liberty and equality, Lincoln's address was revolutionary. By accepting the Gettysburg Address, its concept of a single people dedicated to a proposition, historian Gary Wills writes, "We have been changed. Because of it, we live in a different America. We live in Lincoln's America, and following his example, we forge our own path." Thank you. I'd be happy to field any questions. I don't know how much time we have. I probably took up too much time.
We have 10 minutes.
Left you speechless.
I have a question.
Sure.
Has anybody done any work systematically on this question of the pursuit of happiness, personally, politically, and then for a whole group of people?
I don't think so. As I said at the beginning of the talk, I think all the attention typically goes to equality and liberty. But no, I mean, there's a lot of writing about his struggle to find happiness, and in fact, your speech this morning showcased it. And there's a considerable degree of work, obviously, on emancipation. But no, I haven't seen anything that connects the three in terms of the pursuit of happiness and how this was a goal, an ideal in his life. You know, that's what got me on this path. Is it was very interesting to me to see that in his greatest depths, in his depression, his ultimate ambition was to make other people happier, or make some impact on the world that would maybe make the journey a little easier for others. It's probably idealized, and if you were here for Scott Stabler's talk this morning, he has a very much different take on Lincoln. And they're probably both right in their own way. Everyone has complex motives, and you know, maybe this pursuit of happiness was part of Lincoln's. I almost said Gleaves's. Is that a Freudian slip? We've got Lincoln in the room here, but maybe that was part of his motive, and there were some other more economic motives as well that Scott hit on today.
And do you buy the thesis that it was because of Lincoln's failure to find happiness in his personal life, through his marriage and the tragedy of losing 2 kids, you know, while he was alive, that probably drove him to think of sublimating it? And I mean, if he had been a happy, sort of accommodated dude, he wouldn't have become the great man he was.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. I think the most depressed among us dive into our careers, right? I mean, that's sort of a way to divert our attention from what's horrible about our lives. And we've had H.W. Brands, in fact, speak on this before. I don't know if you guys are familiar with H.W. Brands. Writes a lot of presidential biography, great historian down from the University of Texas. But he wrote on Theodore Roosevelt about this exact idea, basically saying that, like Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt was a deeply depressed man. It ran in his family. I mean, you could see it in his father, you could see it in his sons later. And the way that TR evaded his own depression, I think H.W. Brands had a much more impressive way of saying it. I think he said he was running away from the blackness in his path or something like that. But the way he evaded his depression was by being always at work, constantly working. This is a man who, in the Oval Office, was reading and writing books between appointments. He was staying up to all hours of the night. He just kept himself busy so that he would never have to think about the things maybe that depressed him. And I think you can see the same thing in Lincoln. Brands' take, actually, is that in the age of Prozac, we're missing out on a lot of potential leaders who maybe could have been just as busy as Lincoln and as TR. They could have just done great things, but instead they medicate that depression rather than, apparently, in a less healthy way, running away from it and busying themselves. But it's an interesting question.
Medicate, not sublimate.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you very much.